is tired of London. He is tired of life.
The Battle of Waterloo was won on the playing fields of Eton. On the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond.
Britain, one of the best vacation values in the world. See your travel agent and come to Britain. It's time.
Death Race 2000.
Who are you anyway?
The best driver on earth.
It's time for action.
They're out to stop the greatest driver on earth on a death race across America. It's a cross-country road wreck. Death Race 2000.
They've declared war on the race and on you.
David Carradine, Death Race 2000, rated R.
Starts today everywhere. KNXT, Los Angeles.
Because of the following special program, Tony Orlando and Dawn will not be presented this evening.
You are about to witness the death of a Leviathan. The greatest creatures the world has ever known are being hounded into extinction by man for his own commercial gain. This is their story, and the story of one man's fight to learn their secrets before it is too late. The man, Dr. Roger Payne. His passion and his life work, the whale.
If you're a small animal, you lead a frantic, frightened life. But if you're a whale, all but the grandest things must pass beneath your notice. As the largest animal, including the dinosaurs, that has ever lived on Earth, you can afford to be gentle and to view life without fear. It is this sense of tranquility, life without urgency, power without aggression, that has completely won my heart to whales.
God created great whales, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly. And God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful, and multiply, and fill the waters and the sea. This is Orson Welles, and our story concerns the mightiest of all God's creations, whales, the magnificent monsters of the deep.
The Magnificent Monsters of the Deep is brought to you by Kraft. For 3 generations, showing families everywhere how to make meals easier and more interesting, with good food ideas that range from thrifty dinner dishes to entertaining party treats. Later, we'll tell you where to send for all of tonight's recipes. So keep your pencils ready for the good food and good food ideas from Kraft.
Tonight, April showers give way to May flowers, and warm weather can't be far behind. So, tonight's recipes from Kraft look forward to the great American cookout, starting with some ideas for a picnic. Here's something to put on the top of the picnic basket for a flavorful snack. spread salami slices with Cheese Whiz processed cheese spread from Kraft and wrap them around breadsticks. It's a tasty idea from Cheese Whiz, the little glass jar that's full of ideas. When it's time for dinner, start with this creamy deviled ham dip. Its base is Kraft real mayonnaise, thick and rich because it's made with real whole eggs. You know the old picnic rule about keeping cold food cold and hot food hot, so keep this dip chilled until ready to serve. Now, these tuna take-alongs are perfect to carry on picnics. Tuna salad goes on hamburger buns and is topped with Kraft American Singles processed cheese food, America's favorite American. Wrap the sandwiches in foil for grilling or serve them cold. Either way, they're mighty fine. Finally, for chocolate lovers, pack these delicious cake squares made with the famous flavor of parquet margarine, so right for fine baking and for smooth frostings. At the end of the show, we'll tell you where to write for tonight's recipes. The Great American Cookout can be a picnic when you have the good food and good food ideas from Kraft.
On a lonely beach in the Argentine, surrounded by elephant seals, Roger Payne pursues a study that has made him one of the world's leading scientific experts on whales. A passionate defender of these fast vanishing giants, he helped persuade the U.S. government to put a total ban on the import of whale products. How does a man set about studying a subject as remote and immense as a 60-foot whale? A creature which, like an iceberg, is mainly underwater. The link in Payne's case was acoustics, including the strange noises, often inaudible to human ears, by which many creatures communicate or hunt. For his work on how owls find their prey by hearing in total darkness, Roger Payne received a doctorate at Cornell. One night he was working in his laboratory at Tufts University on how moths detect the sonic pings of hunting bats to avoid capture, when the local radio announced that a small whale had been washed ashore nearby. For some reason he still can't explain, he set out into the wet night for the seashore.
All the way along the beach, I just couldn't wait to get a look at that whale. I'd never seen one up close, and I felt irresistibly drawn to it. When I finally reached it, I was to see that what had happened was pretty typical of what happens to any whale when it encounters man. Two people had carved their initials in the body, and someone else had rammed a cigar butt in the blowhole. Standing there, looking at its lovely, subtle curves, glistening in the cold rain, I decided to try to learn enough about whales to have some influence on their fate.
Roger Payne began his whale study in 1967 in Bermuda. It was an extension of his work with moths, owls, and bats. Small sailing boats became his seagoing recording studios. He chose Bermuda because a small band of humpback whales gathers offshore there in April. Payne had heard some recordings of humpback sounds made by an old friend, Frank Watlington. Now he meant to learn the nature and meaning of those sounds. Perhaps the main force that drove him was the thought of that mutilated whale carcass on the beach. Never far from his mind was the history of persecution the whale has suffered at the hands of man.
People think of the height of the whale slaughter as being at the end of the last century, when the New England whalers pursued the sperm whale in sailboats, not much bigger and certainly not as fast as this sloop. But the real killing time is right now. The greatest 10-year kill that has ever been made was between 1960 and 1970. At least in the old days, whales had some chance of getting back at their tormentors.
Off Bermuda, Roger sought out his whales in much the same fashion as the old-time Nantucket and New Bedford whalers, searching from a masthead while under full sail. As the New England whalers killed off the right and sperm whales in the North Atlantic, bigger and bigger ships started making longer and longer voyages. Even so, a 3-year voyage in the 1860s only killed about 37 whales, 1 whale a month. Today's catches average 30 times as much, between 1 and 2 whales a day. Even in the early 1900s, as this rare early whaling film and Hollywood reconstruction show, methods were still extremely cruel. Today, catches have to be faster and bigger simply because whales are harder and harder to find. The harpoon now has a charge that goes off like a bomb inside the whale.
Unless the main whaling nations, particularly Japan and Russia, stop catching immediately, the large so-called commercial whales will soon reach the point of no return. Some species may already have done so. America and Britain have a total ban on whale oil products, but elsewhere, whales go into lipstick, shoe polish, paint, and bath oil. The madness of it all is that there is nothing a whale offers that can't be obtained from other sources far more abundantly.
Roger Payne's Bermuda whale hunt ended in a quite different and totally peaceful way. He was able to sail right among the humpbacks and pay out hydrophone cables to record them.
For hours at a time, my wife Katie and I sailed in the company of whales or their songs. I think there is nothing that has happened to me that can compare with those days. Rocking gently in a boat with those sounds flooding up out of the sea is like no other experience.
In 1970, those songs found a wider public on a phonograph record that reached a surprisingly large audience, especially among young people. It had a strange effect, deeply touching the emotions, as if it spoke of life's sea origins, long forgotten. The Paynes analyzed the sounds by means of a machine called a spectrograph. It was Katie who, after several seasons' research, discovered that the songs were different each year. The whales were adding or changing phrases each season, as if to say, this is our 1975 saga. Rogers suggested that the sounds made by whales are their means of communication. Before the noise of ships' propellers jammed certain wavelengths, some whales at least might have heard their own kind calling over a distance of several thousand miles. Today's range is limited to about 300 miles. Tragically, most of the ocean, especially the once whale-populated Antarctic Ocean, is empty of whale sounds, because these lonely wastes are practically empty of whales. There are so few whales left in the world. Where could Roger Payne find a place where he could study numbers of whales close to shore? The answer came in 1970. Peninsula Valdez on the south side of the Gulf of San Matias, 600 miles southwest of Buenos Aires, in Patagonia. The dark patches in this space photograph show the 2 bays that attract the whales to Peninsula Valdez. Large, safe, and virtually landlocked. A sea paradise where life happens in slow motion with elemental color. The whales who arrive off Valdez each May and stay until December are different from those whose songs Roger Payne studied off Bermuda. They're southern right whales. The old whalers gave them that name because they were the right whales to hunt. At this time of year, their natural home is the surf, and the females come close into the shore where it's possible to study them. Today, right whales are protected, but only by the nations who belong to the International Whaling Commission. But they're still at the mercy of 11 small whaling nations. In 1970, Roger Payne of the New York Zoological Society made his first exploratory trip to Valdez.
That first afternoon, strolling along the beach among the elephant seals with the whales 30 yards out, I could hardly believe I was alive. It was perhaps the nicest afternoon I'll ever spend. That first trip, Katie and I spent only a month at Valdez. It was enough to tell me that here was the place to get to know and understand something of the mysterious ways of the right whale. It was cold and windy, and we lived in a small tent with elephant seals for company. The whales were so close that I often felt I could touch them. At the end of the month, I knew I had found the best laboratory I could ever have hoped for.
Next August, Roger left his home in Lincoln, Massachusetts, and returned to Valdez, this time with additional help from the National Geographic Society. He brought his family with him. Katie Payne readily agreed to taking the 4 children out of school for 3 months. They'd have to catch up on lessons somehow. But the Paynes agreed that there'd be other invaluable lessons they'd learn from the strange and adventurous life they were about to share. Sam is the youngest. He was then 7. Then there was Holly, 9, Laura, 8, and John, 11. And somehow, fairly chaotically, that first camp on the bleak and windy foreshore of Valdez got set up. That first year, Roger did a good deal of his close observation of whales from rubber boats, often taking the family with him.
All our other experiences indicated that there's little likelihood of being harmed by whales. They're like cows, really, and seem to me the most beguiling and gentle creatures on Earth. I'm sure they're far too alert to overlook a boat in their vicinity. So I felt little concern that a whale might crush a boat when it's breaching. That's leaping from the water. With the children aboard, I tried to stay wide of whales that were playing boisterously. And believe me, whales can play boisterously. Especially large calves who are clumsy and fearless oafs, something that wouldn't worry me if they weren't bigger than elephants.
Gradually, on these early boat trips, Roger began to piece together a picture of the creature he was studying, the southern right whale. The southern right whale is, to put it mildly, a very peculiar-looking animal. The first thing is its staggering size. The right whale is one of the largest of the 10 species of great whales, and a big one can reach 60 feet in length. That's all the way from home plate to the pitcher's mound. That's its mouth. The line of the jaw is curved like a flamingo's beak. As for the white patches, they're called callosities. They're a whale's mustache, eyebrows, and beard. Where a man grows facial hair, a whale has callosities. Coarse hairs actually grow among the white patches. A lot of people mistake the callosities for barnacles.
When you see a whale really close, and you wouldn't want to get much closer than this, it's the breadth of the back that's impressive. An adult right whale's back can be 15 feet across. It looks like a submerged reef or the bottom of a capsized steamer. On a big whale, until the tail flukes are well over 20 feet across. And a single pectoral fin stands 9 feet out of the water. People sometimes forget that whales are air-breathing mammals. Well, here are the gigantic nostrils, the blowholes, to prove it. The weight of an adult is often around 65 tons. And 65 tons, suddenly dumped in the ocean, makes quite a splash. Head on, the animal looks a bit like a nuclear submarine. Color varies quite a bit. Remember Moby Dick and Captain Ahab's search for the white whale? Well, here's a whale we've known for 4 years. A right whale that is nearly a white whale. He was snow white at birth. The trouble is, no matter how much you watch whales from the surface, you seldom get a sense of what the whole animal looks like, except when breaching, almost nothing shows.
Part of Katie Payne's work at Valdez was building up an identification system for all the whales that called in at the bay each year. Mostly she did this with photographs, but she also painted some of the whales. Katie's paintings and sketches give an excellent idea of what a southern right whale looks like when all the component parts, only glimpsed from the surface, are put together. This is a whale looking straight ahead with both eyes. To do this, he must raise his head because the eye is sighted low down, under that bulge. This sketch gives an excellent idea of just how much whale remains hidden when the animal is lying near the surface. There's that downward-looking eye again, with a curve of the lower jaw shown clearly by its gray coloring. And from a gull's eye view, callosities, jaws, and blowhole with bubbles streaking back as the calf turns to keep station with its mother. Their second season at Valdez, the Paynes were ready for more detailed study. They built a cliff-top hut because tents had proved useless for working in the howling Patagonian wind, and the Paynes were beginning to get worried about disturbance to the whales caused by continuous use of a boat. From their windproof hut, they could observe, record, and photograph. As they worked, hydrophones anchored in the bay constantly filled the hut with whale sounds. But the great thing about the cliff-top hut was that the whales came so close inshore that they could photograph and observe them often better than from a boat. Using telephoto lens, the Paynes gradually built up identification dossiers on nearly 200 different whales. The white markings on head and jaw are different in every single whale, as distinctive as a man's fingerprints. They change slightly as the whale grows older, but retain the same basic, highly individual patterns. By checking the face patterns of whales as they arrived in the bay against the photographs, the Paynes soon established that many of the same whales returned to Valdez year after year, mothers often bringing very young calves with them, and sometimes giving birth in the shallow waters of the bay. From the high incidence of calves, Roger Payne began to think that the main attraction of the Valdez Peninsula was the shelter it gave to these youngsters. Some research couldn't be done from the hut, for instance, measuring whales that didn't come close to the cliffs. This had to be tackled from the air, though not from the air alone. Roger invented his own special technique. If he could take an aerial photograph of a whale alongside an object of known size, then by comparing the two, he could arrive at the whale's size. The known object was a circular white disc 1 meter in diameter, mounted on the bow of a rubber boat. Often these smaller members of the whale family, called Fitzroy's dolphins, accompanied the boat, apparently just for the fun of it. had to do, directed by radio from the plane, was to get in the picture with the selected whale. This time it's the white whale who, unsuspectingly, is posing for his aerial portrait. When the pictures are developed, it's a simple matter to measure how many times the 1-meter disc goes into the whale's length. That makes the white whale over 20 feet long, well under half grown. Besides taking aerial photographs, Roger was sometimes able to enjoy the sheer beauty of whales in a playful mood. But, as we'll soon see, Roger was to discover that whales don't leap like this just for joy. There's a purpose behind this fantastic display.
Outdoor party days are coming soon, and whether you call yours a patio party or a garden party or a backyard barbecue, call on Kraft for some entertaining ideas. This barbecue chicken is grilled to perfection with the real cookout flavor of Kraft barbecue sauce simmered all through. The sauce also perks up the flavor of pineapple slices. Delicious. And remember, Kraft barbecue sauce gives outdoor flavor when you're cooking in, too. Now, company potato salad should be something special. This one combines Miracle Whip salad dressing with its special blend of spices and Kraft pure prepared mustard, adding just the right touch of mild but tangy flavor. Write to the address we'll give you at the end of the show for these great American cookout recipes. Now that salad days are here, try this wilted spinach salad made with a heated dressing. Because it's Kraft herb and garlic dressing, the taste is lively as can be. You add crumbled bacon and chopped onion and plenty of Kraft grated Parmesan cheese. Clearly, it's not just a spaghetti cheese anymore. For the finale, try this fruit cookie dessert made with fresh, smooth Philadelphia brand whipped cream cheese, spread over a cookie crust, topped with fruits, and glazed with the good fruit flavor of Kraft orange marmalade. What a great tasting dessert it is. That's the party version of the Great American Cookout, hosted by the good food and good food ideas from Kraft.
By 1974, the pains had multiplied man's knowledge of the behavior of the great whales many-fold. They now had an established camp built from funds provided by the New York Zoological Society. But there's nothing else at Valdez, no entertainment and certainly no school. The 4 Payne children have missed up to 4 months' school in each year. Roger and Katie make them catch up on bookwork, but entertainment is something the children must devise for themselves. All the evidence suggests that they're very good at it. Mouse racing and specially cut tracks in the dunes is a communal sport. The children, Roger says, stick closely together and will probably always be very close as the result of the Valdez experience. They enjoy their parents, too. But they're also self-sufficient individualists. Sam is greatly attached to a tame gull called Lancelot. Naturally enough, they're very strong on animal-human relationships. Netting fish to feed the gull is something they're all willing to cooperate on. Here, in a very cold sea, Sam gets assistance on the seine net from John and Holly. Not all their friendships are with wild animals. The children ride bareback a great deal on a very large Argentine gray called Tordijo. The children have to be almost as at home in the sea as the whale calves themselves. The right whales don't represent a danger to the children, but the parents must keep an eye out for their relatives, the killer whales, and for sharks. Typically, before he came down to Valdez this year, John chose as a school study a natural history subject. You might expect it would have been whales, which are always in view from his cliff-top observation post. But while John and the other children constantly help their parents in their whale studies, his own chosen subject is hawks and their soaring and hunting behavior along the cliff tops of Valdez, where he spent days alone watching them. The children have inherited much of their parents' patience when it comes to studying and observing animals. This shy little creature is a cuis, a relative of the guinea pig that lives around the Paynes camp. They're not easily tamed, but Laura and Sam willingly put in hours getting the cuis used to human presence. This rapport with wild animals, large and small, is one of the things that Roger and Katie Payne believe will have compensated their children for the isolation of Valdez. Possibly the best thing that parents and children get from the whale study is a tremendous sense of family unity. Unity not only within the group, but with their environment as a whole. It's hard not to feel man's relation to the natural world around him, with whales continually blowing and calling in the background, even during breakfast. Roger and Katie feel that their children will somehow catch up on formal learning once the Valdez study is ended. What Valdez has given them is something taught in no school or university on Earth. One day, a strange new apparition appeared on the beach at Valdez. A truck bumped down the rutted track between the dunes at the end of a rough 600-mile ride down from Buenos Aires. The load it carried had been christened the Monster by cameraman Des Bartlett, who helped design it. The Monster was the joint brainchild of Roger Payne and Des Bartlett. If it looks like the conning tower of a submarine, that's because this is more or less what it is. In fact, it's a large tank equipped with a hatch and watertight windows designed for underwater whale observation. From the very moment of its arrival, the whales turned up to observe it. A pair swam close inshore as the 3-ton Monster was painfully unloaded. Launching a submarine is easy compared with launching a submersible, or anyway, this submersible. As captain of this strange craft, Roger made a careful inspection of his floating or possibly sinking or, with luck, half-floating, half-sinking command. The expressions on the faces of his launching crew, including the truck driver and Katie, unmistakably say, God bless all who sail in her, and thank God it won't be me. Getting the 3-ton monster off of the truck and down the beach took the best part of 5 days. Then all they had to do was to wait for the tide to come in. But first for the final fitting out. They hoped that the whales would grow used to the monster so that they could observe them behaving naturally through special watertight windows. The windows were made of curved plastic to avoid distortion. Now Roger had to wait, like King Canute, for the tide to come in. In an hour or two, he'd know whether the calculations were correct and whether the 2 tons of lead ballast loaded aboard was sufficient to keep the monster on an even keel. At last, the monster had tidal liftoff. Katie and graduate student Bernd Versick towed the weird-looking craft out into the bay. Throughout this phase, the whales kept a close watch on the proceedings. Roger descended for his first waterline view of one monster from another. From the half-submerged window, only the rubber boat showed up. But the top window gave him a magnificent view of a curious whale.
I wasn't surprised that the whales showed such interest in the monster. They had systematically destroyed or set adrift everything we ever moored in the bay. Hydrophones, boats, buoys, tide gauges, the works. Now, from the lower window, I could see this one was really interested in his new toy. First, he moved in close and sat quietly for a long while, thinking it over, I suppose. The rubber boat was still standing by. He then began making slow passes, getting braver and bolder and closer and more excited with every pass. I called Katie on the walkie-talkie to tell her to launch a rescue party for the monster and that I was about to bail out. I was confident this whale didn't mean to be aggressive, but the hatch, which was still open, took 10 minutes to close and it hadn't been tested and found watertight. I untied the rubber boat and shoved off, only just in time as it happened. One whale caught its fin around the anchor rope and took the 3-ton monster, plus its anchor, a 55-gallon drum filled with concrete, for a ride.
Amazingly, the monster stayed afloat, but it's just as well Roger abandoned ship. If it had filled, it would have sunk like a stone, taking its captain with it. Whales may be gentle, but they're awfully big. And as Roger's studies were beginning to confirm, they can be careless and play a little rough.
When the boating crowd comes ashore, they bring big sailor appetites with them. So call them to the captain's table for this hearty cookout meal from Kraft. Start with Kraft tangy Italian-style spaghetti dinner, which comes with a packet of herbs and spices for an authentic Italian flavor. One skillet is all you need to cook the spaghetti, the herbs, the rich hearty sauce, and if you like, some cut-up frankfurters. Here's a really handy take-along, shake-along salad. Carry the salad vegetables in a bag. When you're ready to serve, pour in Kraft Golden Caesar dressing, the one with the flavors of real Romano cheese, anchovies, spices, and lemon, balanced so you can taste each one. Then to toss it, all you do is shake. Now here are fresh biscuits you can bake in a skillet, on board, on shore, or right at home. They're made extra tasty with slices of Kraft natural sharp cheddar cheese, the cheese for everyday cooking. Later in the show, we'll tell you where to write for all of tonight's recipes. And for dessert, make these crunchy peanut and jelly bars. The filling is Concord grape jelly from Kraft, a name that means good fruit flavor. The crust and topping are made with oats, peanuts, and delicious parquet margarine. On ship or on shore, the Great American Cookout is easy sailing when you know the good food and good food ideas from Kraft.
For 4 long years, the Paynes have followed the day-to-day life of the Valdez whales. Gradually, an intimate portrait of their behavior has begun to emerge. How whales relate to one another, how they communicate, their forms of play and their forms of competition, the things that interest them and the things that don't. These studies have opened up an entirely new world of knowledge about these gentle giants. For the moment, let's just deal with some of Roger's objective behavioral findings. First, an observation about one of the whale's most familiar aspects, its spout. When a whale blows, the vapor cloud isn't just condensed moisture from the air in its lungs, but surface water trapped in the trough round its blowholes. This is suddenly atomized by the whale, violently breathing out. Another thing Roger learned was that whales have a highly developed sense of play, which takes many forms. Breaching, arching out of the water, and crashing back is one of their favorite games. But even more fascinating, it's also a means of communication, especially in rough weather. Breaching is a noisy activity, so when the wind comes up and the roar of waves drowns out their calls, they resort to breaching to maintain contact with each other. Seen from the air, an adult whale breaching produces about the same disturbance as a pattern of depth charges. And here's another form of communication, lobtailing, slamming the tail down on the water, which the whales use to tell each other where they are. Often a whale will crack its tail down 30 or more times. With a deafening crash, it can be heard 5 miles away. One of the discoveries that most delighted Roger was that whales can sail. In a light wind, they stand on their heads, holding their tail flukes at right angles to the wind and move ponderously along. As far as anyone knows, they're the only marine creatures that consciously use the wind to travel without effort. This whale isn't sailing. It's a female successfully avoiding an ardent male who's swimming around frustrated beneath her. As long as she keeps this attitude, he can't do anything about it. The strategy only fails when her tail sinks beneath the surface. So she quickly recovers her position, using her flippers to hoist her tail into the air again. She's lifting at least 25 tons. Females often keep this up for hours at a time. Roger's research suggests that whales are one of the comparatively few species, like people, that mate all the year round. At Valdez, the principal social activity is courtship and mating. Surprisingly, even though up to 7 males compete for the same female, they do so without the violence their size suggests. But he also suspects that the callosities, the rough white patches, may act like the antlers of a stag in mating fights. Whale skin is so thin that even a light rub may in fact cause enough pain to dissuade rivals. But for the most part, competition seems to involve light pushing and shoving. There's gentleness too. An amorous male strokes a female's back with his flipper. These courtship sessions may go on for hours, even days. They're often accompanied by a weird series of sounds. In matters of love, whales might truly be called warm-blooded. As mammals, of course, that's exactly what they are. Their body temperature is about the same as ours. They become sexually mature about the same age, and they may live for roughly the biblical 70, that is, 70 years. Or rather, they might do so if the whaling industry would only let them. A calf cruises alongside its mother as if she is a tanker from which it must refuel at sea. At Valdez, one of the most endearing things the Paynes observed was the bond between mothers and calves. This calf is probably just under a year old. Like most youngsters, he wants his mother to play with him. His idea of play is to rear out of the water and thump his 10-ton weight fairly gently down on his mother's back. Mother puts up with it for a while and then dies, giving him a cautionary slap with her tail flukes in the process. He takes the hint. Next time, reaches on his own. Finally, he swims up alongside to nuzzle her. For the first time, thanks to Des Bartlett's camera, Roger Payne has been able to get intimate close-up underwater studies of his beloved right whales. Like something out of a Jules Verne fantasy, a 50-footer passes within feet of the camera. The sea off Valdez is like soup, making underwater photography exceedingly difficult. It's clouded with the minute plankton on which these huge creatures live. They strain the tiny animal and vegetable organisms from the water by means of baleen, or whalebone filters, in their mouths. Bartlett's camera hovers feet above the blowhole of a female whale, well known to the Paynes by its face pattern. A jaw partly opens, but not to swallow the cameraman, like Jonah. The camera boat has awakened it, and the whale simply yawning. Its intentions appear entirely peaceful. The cameraman runs the very real risk of being knocked unconscious or having his skull fractured by a blow from the tail flukes as the great body brushes by him. For the first time, almost totally hidden beneath a beetling eyebrow of white, a close-up of that small eye. And here's perhaps the rarest shot of a whale ever taken. You're looking right down its throat as it feeds with its mouth wide open. A mouth so huge, a man could stand upright inside it. The little red eye watches the camera without alarm. In his wetsuit, the cameraman probably looks very much like a seal. The whale passes mysteriously into the murk. The tail, which can drive it at all of 12 miles per hour underwater, gently propelling it along. They arrive at Valdez in May. They leave in December. Even Roger Payne does not know where their mysterious journeys take them. He knows that they do not go south along the coast of the Antarctic. He has searched for them there by plane. He suspects that they might go southeast into the empty mid-Atlantic, where, alas, they're at the mercy of the whale catcher's harpoon, and where neither speed nor size can protect them.
When you're sharing food and stories around a campfire, even the simplest fare tastes like a feast, especially with the great American cookout ideas Kraft has cooked up for you, like this tempting fish, breaded and fried up crisp in delicate, flavorful squeeze parquet margarine. Squeeze parquet is a delicious cooking ingredient, and in its handy squeeze container, it sure is helpful around a campsite. Now, Be Prepared campers bring Kraft macaroni and cheese dinner along. Complement its great flavor by adding canned peas and French fried onions, and you have a hearty, filling camp supper idea. To add a completely different flavor to our camping meal, we have a hot bean medley made with the sweet and spicy taste of Catalina brand French dressing. Poured right out of the bottle, this salad dressing becomes a delicious, unique sauce. And as the evening draws to a close, it's time for an old camping favorite with a new twist: toasted marshmallows, Kraft Jet Puff marshmallows, sandwiched between graham crackers, spread with chocolate-flavored Kugel peanut spread made with real peanuts. They're Kugelicious. In a few minutes, we'll tell you where to write for all of tonight's great American cookout recipes. Then you can head for the great outdoors with the good food and good food ideas from Kraft.
As the whales leave Valdez, Roger is left behind to wonder at their fate. People sometimes ask, of what use are whales to man? To Roger Payne, the question is presumptuous. It assumes that whales exist solely for our use, and that they are nothing more than a source of meat and oil. Payne feels we must learn something from the last dying agonies of the whaling industry. We must learn that it is as wrong to assume the Earth revolves around man as it was to assume the sun revolved around the Earth. In the Antarctic, the once vast herds of whales are gone. They died because we saw them only as an industrial resource and failed to realize their other values. Things which they, as the real masters of the ocean, will someday teach us. Can we afford to squander such a priceless treasure for the sake of a faltering whaling industry? At present, only a handful of countries are bound by treaty to protect the four most endangered species. But there are 117 other nations that have no such commitment. Roger Payne believes what's urgently needed is a protective law ratified by all members of the United Nations.
That massive symbol of greed, the whaling industry, is not only shooting whales out of business, but itself as well. Look at this thriving whaling station in the Antarctic before the First World War. Look at it now. All that leaping, spouting, singing host of whales traded for a pile of scrap metal. What an ignominious end for such a fantastic creature. And what a waste. I find whales irresistibly beautiful. If they're lost to the world, nothing will arise to take their place.
To Roger Payne, there is no question. The sea must be made safe for whales, so that once again, the triumphant words of creation can echo their joyful message across the oceans of the earth. And God created great whales, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind. And God saw that it was good, and God blessed them, saying, be fruitful, and multiply, and fill the waters in the sea. This is Orson Welles. Good night.
The Magnificent Monsters of the Deep has been brought to you by Kraft. For creativity, appetite appeal, and quality, you can count on the good food and good food ideas from Kraft. And to start your collection of delicious Kraft recipes like the ones you've seen tonight, send just a postcard with your name and address to Kraft, Box 1718, Chicago, Illinois, 60690.
The Great Migration of the Wild Beast, a fascinating one-hour special about life and death on the Serengeti Plains of Africa, Monday night at 8/7 Central. Right now, stay tuned for Cannon starring William Conrad with guest star Dane Clark. Tony, Orlando, and Dawn will return next Wednesday night at the regular time on most of these stations.
Burt Reynolds is Lieutenant Dan August.
It had your fingerprints on it.
Tough, professional.
I want to find the person that killed him.
There's only one Burt Reynolds, and he's Dan August.
1 hour from now on CBS.